Kelly, welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, I loved being on your podcast and I love where we went. And you were like, hey, come be on my podcast. So it's great that we get to sort of flip the mic
Yeah.
and for me to be able to pick your brain because I know you've been podcasting longer than I have. You and I are both really aligned with giving women power to have their own voice and to tune in to that
hmm
inner voice. And so I'm just curious, maybe for our listeners, just give us a background on how you got to this space where you're at and what brought you into this being a passion and where you're just really now having this, I guess, megaphone platform to the world around this topic.
Well, my background is in actually music. I'm a professional musician and I have 2 degrees in flute performance, which, was appalling to my mother because she thought, "Oh, how are you ever going to get a job in flute performance?" She was worried about me. And the funny thing is I still do that. I taught at the college level for a really, really long time, about 20 years. And then I also now play in a professional orchestra, and I've been with them for almost 10 years now.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so I have like this whole other part of my life, but it's related because what I realized is during my time of teaching flute, of course, I'm teaching people how to play scales and people how to play certain pieces of music. And I'm coaching all of sort of these musical foundational pieces. But what I really loved doing was helping my students understand everything that they have inside of them.
Mm,
Like so much about being a confident performer as a flutist or as any musician is understanding, like, it's just having that confidence and believing in yourself, like believing that you can do that. And so that's sort of where this started. And then, as I, grew into adulthood and I had my kids, I started doing other things in my life. And the next thing that I was passionate about was triathlon. And I like went all in on triathlons. I loved racing, and then I got my coaching certification and I was a coach, and it was the same thing. I can give people the training plans and I can say, this is what you need to do to be ready for the race.
mm,
But my favorite part was this idea of like, you got to believe that
mm.
what you have is already inside of you. And when I started to sort of put these pieces together, this through line of my life, I realized what I most want to do is support women in believing in themselves
Mhm.
and loving themselves and seeing that they are enough already, that they don't have to check all of these boxes in order to be enough and in order to take action on their dreams. And your dreams can be anything, right? That could be starting a business, it could be becoming a professional flutist, it could
Mhm.
be racing a triathlon, whatever those dreams are. You can take action on them. You don't have to wait until all of these boxes are checked to do that because you're enough right now.
Mm.
And I love that message so much. And I think a lot of that is because I had to learn that lesson too. So much of my life was about checking off the things,
Well, and
right?
achieving, like you did
Yeah.
flute, you got to do it all the way. You do exercise, you got to do triathlon, right? Like
Mhm.
I totally relate to that. I had the
Mhm.
same thing going on. And it's still, I did it with spirituality, I did it with religion, I did it like you can't achieve spirituality. It's not
Right.
something you like achieve, especially with box ticking or
No. Well,
checklisting.
that's just it. And I came to the point in my own life where I started recognizing, I mean, and there are some sort of pinnacle moments that I just really remember this. One of them was crossing the race or crossing the finish line of a race that I did. And it was like a really like huge deal, like this big long triathlon. I had trained all summer for it and I wanted to hit a certain time. And I crossed the finish line. And the first thing I did was I looked at my watch and I was 1 minute over that time. And I was disappointed. And I really had to sort of take a step back from that and do some deep soul searching. Like I just did this really wonderful thing that took a lot of time and effort and energy and passion, and I'm going to be like disappointed because of 1 minute. Like, is
Right.
1 minute really going to be what stands in between me and feeling enough?
I have a sad story when you're talking about how you started as a musician. That's how I started my achievement path as well. I glommed onto the clarinet only because my older sister got bored of it and my
Hmm.
parents really couldn't afford another instrument. So I took her clarinet. She's a year older than me. And from fifth or sixth grade on, it became the thing. And it got to where I was an all-state musician my freshman year of high school, which is pretty uncommon to
Yeah.
for that to be in ninth grade. And I just went all the way up and actually moved to a music magnet school in California. My senior year of high school was first chair clarinetist there. We did all these competitions and state won all these awards. And then my high school band teacher, my senior year, said, I really think that you could have a career in music. And so I'm willing to write you a letter to try to get you a music scholarship. So I picked the college I wanted to go to. And I kid you not, I did a tape, those little Fisher Price, like tape old, I don't know if you remember this. My little siblings had this Fisher Price cassette tape thing. And that is what I did my audition tape with. Well, the school that I applied to that I wanted to go to, they said, we really want you in our program, but we can't give you a scholarship. And do you know, this is how black and white I was at that time as an 18 or 19-year-old, 18-year-old actually. I never picked that clarinet up again just because, well, I
Oh,
did, but I'm speaking in a general, I'm probably exaggerating, but kind of like I quit. I quit my talent with music. I quit all of it. And I also played the piano. Um, and I pretty much was like, I I just because I did not get that scholarship, I didn't join the music program at all at that school. I still went to the school, but I was like, well, if they don't want to give me a scholarship, I'm not going to play, right? And I remember I sobbed for days and days and days after I got the quote unquote rejection letter. Um, and I've looked at the pattern in my life, especially through my early adulthood and middle adulthood. Now I'm like 52, but how I would like joining them, pageants and doing pageants until I won. And then like, hey, first runner up is not acceptable, right? In my business, I had to hit the highest rank. Like as I look at this pattern of how, like you said, that 1 minute, that little 1 minute thing, like, it's like now I'm going into this like, hey, and you and I talked about this before we started recording. It's quantity, it's quality over quantity. It's the essence of something over how you get recognized or how you rank in that, right? Or that
yeah.
achievement
I've been thinking
focus.
a lot lately about like rank, as you put it, comparison, really. I feel that we are taught to understand ourselves only in relationship to where other people are.
Yeah.
Like I don't think that I was ever taught how to just like sort of like look at myself and see myself for who I am right now and honor that and say, wow, look at that. It's always about, well, where do I compare? Where does this fall on the spectrum
Where
of
should I be right
success?
now?
Where should I be?
What window did I
Exactly.
miss? Like
Yeah.
that FOMO, fear of missing out,
Hmm.
has been a real craw in my psyche for I don't know why. Like I it's like, oh, and well, actually I do know. And maybe you can relate to this, maybe you can, but very, very early, um, I wanted to please God because, I was raised in a religion where that was everything. That was the
Hmm.
whole worldview that I carried into my adulthood. And I'm just now getting to the space where I'm like, I don't think God is like, well, you were 1 minute shy of your triathlon, like, metaphorically speaking, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
in my mind anyway, I'm not gonna put that on you, but in my mind, it was like, no, I have to do this all the way. That's why I was saying you can't really achieve spirituality. And that was a huge aha for me,
Mhm.
that it wasn't about the outward manifestations. It was what was in my heart.
Mhm.
And I still struggle with that balance. And you and I are going to talk about balance. But I don't know if you can relate to that. I don't know if you had like sort of this religious upbringing, or maybe in more of a closed system where it became, some families are like this, where it became, hey, if XYZ isn't part of what, like, if you can't make a linear trajectory for success or spirituality, let's just say, then it kind of it kind of sets you like apart from the crowd or the
Mhm.
community and the group think.
Yeah, I was raised in a really religious household too, and that has been sort of unlearning a lot of those
Mhm.
beliefs has been, I think, a really wonderful thing about my adulthood, and something that's been challenging but also so rewarding to just sort of untwine myself. Like it was almost like a rope that was wrapping me up, and I just had to like unwind myself out of that rope. And for me, it wasn't performance based in, that there were certain levels to achieve. It was more about goodness. Like these were the things that I had to be good. Even into adulthood, I had to be a good wife, and I had to be a good mother. And this is what being a good mother looked like. And this is what being a good wife looked like. And so it was
Yeah.
like all these prescribed paths for me
Mhm.
that I had to fall into. And what's so interesting about that is even from a very young age, before the unwinding began, I felt um, I felt at odds with those paths, those prescribed paths. And I remember sort of having arguments with my parents about like, oh, the right to be a woman and like what are women's rights and how does this work in the Bible? Like I struggled with that even when I was young. And
Yeah.
so it's always been there for me. And even it's interesting just now looking back, I can see that like that that authenticity of who I am as a woman, as a person, it was always there. It just got really covered up with a lot of other people's stories.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to find my air to breathe, so to speak.
I think that is a great segue into, how we can get this burnout, but let's segue more into what you and I are also really co-passionate about, which is this whole balance, this false balance narrative about being in
Oh,
balance. The
yeah.
myth, there's actually articles and books written on the myth of balance and things because people are starting to realize this is an illusion.
It's it is dangerous. I think it's actually dangerous because balance is not possible. Like there's only I always think of it as like there's only 100% of me. Like I only have 100%, right? And I can put 27% of me into this thing and I can put 42% of me in this thing, but and of course I picked really hard numbers so I can't do that math that fast, but there's only so much of me to go around. And
Mhm.
so if I want everything to be equal all of the time, I'm not going to really be all in on anything
Yeah.
unless I only do one thing, which I don't. Like I can't just do one thing.
Well,
It's
the
not
human
part
brain
of
can
me.
really only focus, and they've done studies. There's tons of research on this now. You can really only effectively focus on literally one thing at a time. That's why the
Mhm.
power of being present, I mean, that's why being present is so powerful because that's all you have. But
Right.
multitasking is, which I've played in that space,
Right. Yeah.
it's you can't it's so, not only does it keep you from being present, but you're so like ineffective and thinned out and burned out because you're trying to do all these things at one
Hmm.
time.
Well, and I think I'm not even talking, I mean, when I say I do many things, I think we all do. Like if you have a family and a job, there's two
That's a
things
lot.
that you
Yeah.
do, you know. And then if you have friends, and if you have maybe a hobby or something that you enjoy doing, or uh you like to actually take care of yourself and exercise or practice some form of self-care, right? So all of a sudden we have all of these things on the table, and I'm not going to be able to equally split myself between all of those things every single day. And I think that people who try to get you to believe that it's possible to do that are leading you down this path of just failure, because you try, you think, well, I can do that. If I do this and this and this, I can find that work life balance. And then you get there and it's like crossing the finish line and being a minute over. And
Mhm.
all of that is going to lead to is this idea that, well, I can't do it. There must be something wrong with me. And there's nothing wrong with you. There's something wrong with the system that tells us that that is possible.
Right. And there's
And
so many systems that are telling us that.
yes, yeah, and there
It's
it's
so
oppressive.
pervasive. Well, and
Yeah.
for me, it's like it all leads back to what you're saying. It's that we are there's a deficiency aspect to this. Like you're not enough. You're deficient because you can't do da 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 da. Da.
That's exactly right. You're broken.
You're broken, not the system,
Mhm.
not the institution,
That's right.
not the programming, you. And that's why it's a never, you can't win. Like it's a
Mhm.
hamster wheel. So
Well, you can win by stepping off the hamster
yeah,
wheel.
exactly.
Right? Like, but that takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of
Mhm.
self-awareness to be able to do that. And it takes practice. You know, we were talking about this idea of achievement, like you can't achieve spirituality. You're exactly right, because you have to practice it. It's
Yeah.
something that you have to do over and over and over
It's not
again.
it's not an end point. You don't get
That's
a
correct.
trophy, you don't get an award, you don't,
Right.
I think one of the most dangerous, some of the most dangerous rhetoric we get, um, is that we're trying to achieve something now for the afterlife.
Mm.
And it eclipses what's happening now. Like you can't be really truly happy now because there's all these things to do and you're delaying that joy or happiness for something you're going to quote unquote achieve in the afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an ideology that gets perpetuated generationally. It goes all the way back,
Yeah.
especially in religion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I would even say there are some people who are stuck in loveless relationships. I would even say dangerous relationships, dangerous ideologies because they just accept that that's their fate and that
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
when they move on to the next life, instead of like you're saying, which is this courage to get off the hamster wheel, this determination, the self-awareness, as you say, that's needed to be like, no, I deserve to be happy now. I deserve to honor my wants, longings, and desires now.
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
not bad. It's so spiritual to do that. It's
It,
not
it
selfish.
it's not selfish, and I believe it's essential. Like it's not just like, oh, that would be nice if I did that. You know, no, we must do that, or we're not actually living the life that we were meant to live.
Right.
And that's how important it is, I think, to see that we've been sort of fed this like book of lies of what life is supposed to look like and feel like. And when we
Yeah.
start to take back our own power and responsibility over our lives, then we can say, like you said, I can do this thing, like I'm having this interview with you. I am here now. I am 100% all in with you right now. and this feels so good to me. This is flow to me.
Yeah.
This is where I want to be. And when I'm done with this, I'll go check in on my kids and I'm going to be 100% there. And
Right.
over the course of the day, will it be equal? No, it's not going to be equal.
No, and
It's
it
not going
should
to be balanced.
and I truly believe that the universe has our back in the sense that like whatever is presented to you at any given moment of time is the most important thing for you at that moment.
I love
And
that.
and I've had to go into a major exercise of trust around that because I believe I had to create it all.
Oh,
But I couldn't
yeah.
just allow it to come. My kids and I watched that Mr. Rogers movie over the weekend. What is that? Won't You Be My Neighbor? Um, I know there's a documentary on the movie, but we watched the Tom Hanks movie.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a line in there that reminds me of what you talked about when you were saying, okay, I'm doing this interview right now. This is the most important thing right now. Where Mr. Rogers said to the journalist that was writing an article on him, he said, right now, the most important thing in the entire world to me is you. And he was talking to the reporter because that's who was in front of him. That's what was happening in that moment. So in the entire world, that was the most important thing to him right
Mm.
then. And it made that cynical reporter feel so loved and seen and
Yeah.
special. And I just was like, what if I could live like Mr. Rogers?
Well, and when you just said that, what immediately came to my mind was like, there's so much simplicity in that. We all, I
Yes.
think, feel at any given moment, we might feel overwhelmed by the amount of things that we have to do. And I'm using air quotes around to do. But if we just do the thing that's in front of us
Hmm.
at any given moment, how much simpler is that
Yeah.
going to be? And a big part of my practice this year has been honoring my own energy and my own flow. And I've been doing that very intentionally. And it's interesting because what I'm finding is I don't always like it. Like, I don't always like where my flow wants to go. I don't always
Yes.
like where my energy is. But if my intention is to honor that, I have to learn to be okay with that. Sometimes I'm not going to like it.
Yeah. And that's where the trust comes in.
Hmm.
Because if you really believe that everything is always happening for your highest good, even if it looks ugly, and that's the thing, that's why balance is a myth, because you go into good, bad, right, wrong, right?
Right.
And you miss the deeper lesson of that.
Hmm.
So you and I talked about a word that we like better than balance. Do you want to tell everyone?
Yeah, no, I was hoping that we would get to that. So it was so funny because we were talking before and you said something about harmonization. And I was like, that's how I think about balance. And
Hmm.
maybe it's the musical parts of us. But to understand in music how a chord works,
Hmm.
so a chord is something that has three or more notes. So, and you play them at the same time. And there's any
Hmm.
chord can be stacked up in different ways. But so, say we have a C major chord, the notes are C, E, and G. You can spell that chord C, E, G, or you can spell it E, G, C, or you can spell it G, E, C. You can have low notes, you can have high notes. But if those three notes are in there, it's always going to be a C chord. So if my life is a C chord, it can have those notes in different places. And the weights of those notes can have different weight. On some days, the weight of family, and I don't mean weight in a bad way, I just
Right.
mean the emphasis, right,
Right.
is put on my family. Some days the emphasis is on my job as a podcast host. Some days the emphasis is on my work as a musician. Someday the emphasis is on myself, taking care of myself, going for a walk, doing yoga. And it's going to shift and flow, and the harmony is going to change. And that's what really makes our life beautiful. I don't want
Mm,
my life to be the same note day after day after
yeah.
day. It
And that
shifts and it moves.
exactly. It reminds me back to the music. It's like a dance.
Yes.
It's the
Yeah.
it's and there's another quote that I need to say, that I self-published a book on depression right after I lost my sister to suicide, and she was a mother of 5 children. There's a whole thing around that, but it's been 16 years. But there was a quote I found, and she was a musician too, but she was like 10 times the musician I ever could want to be. She was born with perfect pitch. She had the voice of an angel. She was the lead in all these school musicals. She played several instruments by ear. She was just that really powerful musician. And she too had a music scholarship to college, which she turned down to go to get married. But anyway, the quote was about dying, not dying with your music inside of you.
Mm.
And it reminds me of what you're saying with all these harmonics and how you can have really this resonation, right? Where there's this blend and it's so diverse for everyone to have their own kind of music inside of them. But like she did die with her music inside of her. She didn't have the freedom, you know, as I'm looking back on her life and having all this space around it now to see really where she was at. She didn't have the freedom she wanted. She didn't feel spiritual. She felt unworthy. She stopped writing in her journals and or she was writing in her journal that she had stopped praying 2 years before she died, which for her, you know, and for our faith of origin, that's a big deal. Because that's everything is to have this communication with God as the God of your understanding. And so she stopped all that communication because she felt so unworthy.
Mm.
But she had all these talents and gifts, and she was so loving and it's just sad to me that she sort of went on this altar of like, I'm not enough. To me, suicide is the grandest, most overt expression of not enoughness,
Yeah.
deficiency, the loss of hope that you never could be enough.
Mm-hmm. It's tragic. It's
So
tragic. And I
tragic.
feel that so many women, while they might not go that far, that they've given up. Like that they've just looked at their life and they've said, well, I guess this just is how it's supposed to be.
Hmm.
And they've stopped being willing to try to make it look differently. And I say that with so much compassion
Totally.
because I
I feel
can
it.
see how easy it would be to get there. And the reason it would be easy is because practicing enoughness does not come naturally, and it
Yeah.
it takes doing it day after day after day after day. I've been doing it daily for years and years and years. And sometimes that perfectionism, that you're not good enough voice still comes up and it grabs me and shakes me by the shoulders. And it's shocking to me that that can still happen.
I
And
know.
if you're not in the practice of that, if you're not understanding how important that practice is
And
to honor your
if you're not
enoughness.
aware, if you don't have
Yes,
awareness around, oh, here it
that's
comes,
right.
as opposed to believing it when it comes,
Mhm.
instead of just noticing it, like, oh, here it comes again.
Yeah.
This is not me.
Mhm.
This is not who I am.
Mhm.
I have a question for you. Because I know you wrote the Enoughness Planner and your work's been featured in like the Huffington Post and other media around what we're talking about being enough, really, not doing enough,
Yeah.
being it, claiming it. So when you're talking, you know, as a standpoint of a musician and you're talking about harmonics and how we can have this inner resonation, how does a person really just like let their own music be them? Like, how do you bridge over to this is who I am? This is how I want to play in the world, dance in the world, be in the world,
Mhm.
and detaching maybe from all these expectations out here and all these lies we've been fed.
Mhm.
How do you
Ba-
really see that happening for a woman, let's just say?
baby steps. Like it
Mm,
happens. It's not like a light switch. It's not like moving house. Like I'm just going to move to this different house and then I'm going to be this different person. It is
mm,
one tiny action that leads to another tiny action. It's writing down every day, my efforts today are enough.
mhm.
It's honoring who you are. It's finding people that you can trust. And sometimes that may be someone that you have to pay, right? It
You do
may
well,
be a
I believe we
coach.
all need someone to bounce stuff off of.
Yeah, it
Like,
may
it's
be
an
a coach.
imperative.
It might be a therapist. Maybe
Yeah.
you have a friend that you can trust fully and completely to start being that person with. And here it is. It's not that you're starting being that person. You're actually going back to being that person because you have always been enough from the moment that you were born. And what
Mhm.
happens is in life, all of these other things get piled up so deeply on top of that that you forget it. And so, what we just have to do is we have to go back. We have to start peeling off the layers one by one, and we have to go back and we have to practice being that person. And I'll just show you. I know that this is audio, but I'll show you that on my desk I have
Oh,
a
this will
little
be on YouTube.
picture.
We're going to be on YouTube too.
Okay,
Oh, hold it up.
I,
Yeah, I see it.
this is it's a Polaroid, so I hope it lasts forever. But this is me, a little 3-year-old me,
Mm,
with my grandmother who loved me dearly. She left this world too early. And I have that there. I have this right on my desk to remind myself of who I've always been. Because
mm,
when I was that little girl, I knew that I was enough.
mm,
And I can bring that with me. And I really believe that the practice of doing that, it changes us, it transforms us, and
mm,
it helps us to love ourselves more. It helps us to love the people around us more.
mhm.
And it really gives us the courage to do what we were born to do.
I love that because we do need courage is courage is one of those things where it just doesn't come out of nowhere. You cultivate it through these practices because
Hmm.
really you can do anything with courage. Anything
Hmm.
that you have, that you choose to do really, or
Hmm.
that's put on you. But it always comes down to choice, comes down to wanting more for yourself. Um, so claiming this enoughness is really the practice of, like you said, micro. I call it micro bursting. I love that you call it micro step or mini steps or baby steps, one step at a time.
Yeah.
Um, when I say micro burst, I mean, for me, and this is just my personality because I can be pretty intense sometimes around achieving and focusing on things. Like I took the Strengths Finder test, and it really is like how I'm built. It's focus and achieving, and the shadow aspect of that is, I tie my worth into my performance, right?
Hmm.
But the micro bursting for me looks like when I can feel like that heaviness that we talked about, where things are weighing down on me, whether it's piled up emotions or expectations, role expectations that have been put upon me, or I'm putting self-imposed, I want to burst. Like the micro burst looks like me putting my foot down and be like, no, no, I'm
Yeah.
doing it again.
Hmm.
I'm outsourcing all this. I'm not tuning into my inner voice. I'm too busy, because
Hmm.
really that is what weighs us down is the outer. It's not, we've internalized what we perceive that our outer world is putting on us. We
Yeah.
perceive that. So it's like
Hmm.
time to like wipe my glasses off, put the new lens of perspective on, and connect deeply back in to who she
Hmm.
really is.
Hmm. I love that.
So, wow, we could keep going on with this, but you talk about creating kinder habits, which is all of what we're
Hmm.
talking about. And it's like you said, it's those little things that compound over time. But don't you think it's kind of the consistency of just of the self-awareness, let's just say, of kind of catching it before it goes down
Yes.
like A to Z?
Yeah, I think consistency is huge. And this is why I love the idea of kinder habits, because as a former chronic overachiever, recovering perfectionist, I can get achievy, about this too. And I think that it's really important to remember that doing something over and over and over again every day, the purpose of that is not to have all of the check marks on, the habit tracker at the end of the month. The purpose is to remind yourself to do it, to remind yourself that this is important, that this is something that I know will help me feel the way that I want to feel. And so if you're just phoning it in, I used to tell this to my flute students, like you could practice an hour a day and get nothing done because you're just going through the motions just so you can say you did it. But with kinder habits, with this consistency of like tapping into your inner voice, of understanding, of cultivating enoughness, you're doing it because it matters and you're keeping track of it. I like to keep track of it for myself so I can pay attention to also patterns like,
Yeah.
oh, look, I went 5 days last week and I didn't do my journaling and now I feel this way. Isn't that interesting?
Mm,
My creativity feels stuck when I'm not journaling. Oh, well, I need to get back to journaling, even if maybe I don't feel like it,
right.
you
And
know?
creating those flow states consistently where you're
Yeah.
just, yeah. Wow. Well, awesomeness. How can we find you, Kelly, on
Uh,
your platforms?
the best way to find me is my website, kellycovert.com, or on Instagram at Kelly J. Covert. And I am creating like this beautiful community of women over on Instagram. We're having really wonderful conversations about the myth of balance, recovering from perfectionism, really taking action in your life
Mm,
and in your business, if you have a business, and just loving yourself and knowing that every single day you are worthy. So I'd love for you to join me. And if you want to learn more about the Enoughness Planner, which is a great tool that you can use to cultivate your own enoughness, I use it. I use my own book every single day.
yeah. And really, the journaling piece of it, like I'm just
Yeah.
telling listeners, like, even if you don't consider yourself a journaler, there's so much power in tactile, like writing things down.
Hmm.
It takes it from the ethereal into the tactical world, the true world, the physical world. So it makes what's
Yes.
spiritually ruminating into the physical realm. I'm
Yeah.
just going to give a plug for that because it's massively huge to
Right.
be able to do that.
And the beautiful thing about the Enoughness Planner is it tells you, it walks you through the steps of understanding, what it is that you're writing down. It's not just free journaling. I mean, although there is space for that, it's really focused and it doesn't take very long each day. And it's really just a way, like I said, to create kinder habits for yourself. So you're tapped in
Mhm.
to your enoughness and to your inner voice every single day. So that's on my website and take a look at it. It's something I'm really proud of and I'm really honored to share with everyone.
Thank you. And thanks for showing up for us today. This has been an
Oh,
awesome
Cherie, thank you so much for having me. This has been fun.